When Chris Buckley watched 7 tobacco executives swear before Congress that their product was not addictive, his heart sank. His new novel, Thank You for Smoking, satirizes the sin lobbies, so he was afraid he'd been outdone by real life. He shouldn't have worried. The New York Times called the book hilarious and timely, and other reviewers, for the most part, have concurred. Buckley is the son of author and columnist William F. Buckley, Jr., and the author of 3 previous books, and I'm pleased to have him here from Washington. Welcome.
Good to be here, Charlie.
Great to have you. Now, I mean, what do you mean by you're the Cindy Lauper?
Well, I'd rather talk about DNA, but
I think
I'm glad you had
covered
that
DNA. Thank you very much. But by the way, what in the world were you doing yesterday as a cultural commentator on NBC?
I was talking
looking
about
at the implications, as your dad would say. Implications. Ramifications.
Well, I was talking about the big picture, Charlie. But serology is a sidelight of mine.
Yes, I didn't know that.
Not many people do.
I want to talk first about how this got started. I mean, it didn't get started with you watching tobacco. Well, maybe it did. What caused you to say there is gold in them there books?
I was watching either the McNeil-Lehrer show or Nightline, or possibly even this show, Charlie.
And where's my cut, sir?
It's coming. It's in the mail. And on came a spokeswoman for the Tobacco Institute, denying, of course, that there's any link between smoking and lung cancer, heart disease, or bunions. And
Yes.
I thought, well, that must be a pretty interesting job, selling death for a living. So, and then a few days later, I saw there was another disgruntled postal worker had shot up the post office and killed 20 people. And there was a spokesman for the NRA saying, well, if we start outlawing street sweeper shotguns, the next step is ballpoint pens.
That's right.
And so I thought, so the idea formed of a trio of these spokesmen for the gun, alcohol, and tobacco industries.
Right, and let's set the stage. They meet once a week.
They meet around a table like this.
Call themselves the Mod Squad.
They call themselves the Mod Squad.
Which stands for Merchants of
Death.
All right, and who are they, these 3 people?
Nick Naylor from the Tobacco Institute, Polly Bailey from the Liquor Lobby, which calls itself the Moderation Council, of course, and Bobby J. Bliss from the gun industry, which calls itself Safety.
Which stands for?
The Society for the Advancement of Firearms and Effective Training of Youth, formerly the National Right to Bear Arms Committee.
Now, what are you saying about lobbying in Washington in this satirical look?
Well, I'm saying that nice yuppies do bad things.
Because they've got a mortgage to pay.
Because, yeah, I researched. I come from, my background is journalism, and I like to research my books. So I sent out some letters, some mildly disingenuous letters to real life spokespeople saying that I was working on a book on neo-Puritanism, which I also was.
Neo-Puritanism.
And I had a couple.
Is it the new Puritanism?
Yes. I'm here to denounce it. And so they thought I was a very good thing.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of sessions with Brennan Dawson, who was the very capable,
very attractive,
Lauren
very bright,
Bacall
very interesting,
tobacco spokeswoman.
And very competent.
Very competent, very competent. And at the end of the second session, I was sort of dying to ask her what a nice girl like you was doing in a place like this.
Did you?
No, I'm a sensitive 90s male.
Yes, you are.
And I denounce sexism wherever it exists, as I know you do.
Well, of course I do.
But so I said, "What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?" And she was very, she's perfect. She sort of blew out a lungful of smoke and shrugged, said, "I'm just paying the mortgage." So out of this grew, in the book, the yuppie Nuremberg defense. Yes. I was only paying the mortgage. Which is what we're all doing, one way or the other.
One way or the other.
You might even have a mortgage yourself.
Yeah, I might. A couple, as a matter of fact. Now, so Nick is on the plane. He's flying across country. And somebody's sitting next to him and says, what? Pick up the line here.
Someone... it's
I forgot where he's flying
I think
to,
it's Barbara Streisand's issues person.
Yeah,
so,
right.
All these Hollywoods, it's now chic to have an issues person on
you
your staff to
those.
advise you on Bosnia if you're Barbara Streisand. And she...
He said it, Barbara, I didn't.
a fine chanteuse, And she recognizes him because he's on TV the whole time, and she says, "I know you, don't I?" And she says, "I know a lot of good people who've died from lung cancer." And Nick says,
"That's not funny. What's funny is coming."
"No, it's not. This is not funny, Charlie." And Nick says, "What? No bad people?" She gets very mad.
Nick is an interesting and funny guy. I mean, you deliberately wanted to sympathetic. Well, witty. I mean, you've deliberately created somebody that's what? That
He's a lot like you, Charlie.
That you
Witty,
gotta like,
good-looking, you know, got a couple of mortgages.
I could be a lobbyist first.
This is known as sucking up to the host.
Yeah, that's what it is, sucking up to the host. Now, this is a huge success story, right?
Well, it's
the previous book was not such a huge success story.
No, because I didn't promote it.
No, it's not why it wasn't.
Well, they also brought it out in the middle of the Desert Storm, which is not such a good time to have a thriller come out.
It was their fault.
Well, it was well reviewed. You know,
it could have been a huge success too.
Well, it was optioned by the movies and all that, but it was a mistake to do. I wrote a book that a kind of book that I don't read. It was a thriller, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Do you read Langford Oakes' CIA stories?
Yes,
or spy
I'm a
stories
big fan of
your
Langford
father's.
Oakes. In fact, he has a very good book out right now called A Very Private Plot. But buy my book first. No, buy it too. Buy both of them.
Do you ask your dad to read before? I mean, does he edit for you? Do you two have this kind of?
We exchange. There's an exchange of manuscripts, and it's kind of fun when you can talk shop with your old man.
Yeah. Are you closer to your mom or your dad?
Well, I'm closer to both of them, but they're two very different people. I'm descended from two larger-than-life people. My mom is a
one of the funniest
people I know.
Is a glorious
character out of Noel Coward.
Yes,
she is. And to the extent I have a sense of humor, I think a lot of it comes from her. But he's got not a bad sense of humor.
But he, as you know, he wrote about this, and then he talked to me about this. I mean, there was a point where there was some. You were separate.
Oh, we're going to talk about.
Well, we are just for a moment.
The estrangement.
Yes, we are.
We'll be right
come on
back after this.
Oh, come on, give me something. There was a moment of. You're not going to help me,
the
are you?
Oprah show?
Well, it's true sometimes.
Sons of conservative fathers and the fathers have
See, he doesn't want to talk about him. Okay. That's fair
well,
enough.
you know,
the reason I'm interested in this is because he talked about it in an eloquent way, and then I just read
on national
TV he did in a very eloquent way.
Oh, really?
And in fact, if I'd thought about it, I would have run the tape.
Let me rise to this challenge.
Yes, indeed. I'm setting you up to be good. And so now I just read where you two went sailing somewhere.
Yeah,
there was a day you were lost at sea. It wasn't quite an estrangement. It's just that both of you were very busy and you weren't communicating as much as usual.
That happens. That happens.
There's nothing to be gained here, is there?
Well, I had. I think things change when you become a father yourself. I mean, I have a 6-year-old daughter, Catelyn.
Right.
And you know, when I'm an only child, and I had been.
I know what it's like.
My father and I had a. Oh, you know what it's like.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then my father and I had a very tight, intimate relationship, and now suddenly there's someone else in my life. You know, a baby, and a lot of your psychic energy perforce has to go to that. And I think there can be some natural resentment. And anyway, we just. We didn't speak to each other for a while, and it was a very unhappy period for me. But happily, it ended, and we spent a week on a small sailboat last week, so we got along.
How did the period of not speaking end?
I called him on Father's Day.
Good for you.
It's a heartwarming story.
It is a good story. Yes,
it
was worth me plumbing those depths, wasn't it?
There's going to be a TV movie of the week based on it.
Well, speaking of that, you've sold this to Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson has bought this book. Yeah.
Now, did you think movie when you wrote this?
No.
You didn't.
No,
you didn't create these characters saying this is. I mean, this is a sure bet.
I thought money when I wrote this, Charlie. No, I thought novel. You write a book, and happily, he bought it, and as a matter of fact, they're going to finish the script next week.
He bought it before it was reviewed. Before it was released. He bought it
which is nice.
Yeah. Are you working on another one already? I mean, is this?
I am. It's about a talk show host from North Carolina.
No, don't tell me. It's going to be boring, isn't it?
No. It's lurid and exciting.
Oh, no.
In fact, it's already been bought by the movies.
Tell me, is that right?
Yeah.
And who's going to play the talk show host from North Carolina?
Denzel Washington.
It's a perfect casting, I would say, from Pelican Brief to Malcolm to the Charlie Rose story.
It's Bob Rose.
Bob Rose, thank you very much. New York versus Washington. You live in New York. You were raised in Connecticut. You went to school at New Haven.
Right.
Why do you live in Washington? Why do you like Washington better than New York?
I went down to work for George Bush in
speechwriter.
1981. I was a speechwriter. And like everyone else who goes to Washington, I figured I'd be there for a year. And here I am. It's 1994.
You got a mortgage, right?
I got a mortgage. Oh, boy, do I have a mortgage.
But do you like it better than New York? Or is it just, I mean,
well,
are you part of the political culture down there now? So that
not so much. I have, I have friends who are in it. Most of them, unfortunately, are liberal. But
Unfortunately, they're liberal?
Well, I just seem to hang out with
Yeah.
liberals. I like to shower with liberals. But I have the best of both worlds because
you can come up
I have
with-
a day job, which I'm not about to quit. I'm the editor of something called Forbes.
Yeah, that means you come up
FYI.
here one day a week, that's all.
Well,
one day a week to edit this magazine.
Sometime for 2 days.
Oh, two
But it's a
sometimes.
quarterly.
Yeah.
It's not a weekly.
So you don't
or
have to
monthly.
be here every day, do you?
No, and you can do a lot by phone and
Yeah.
fax. But I ride the Metroliner, and just about every week. I made 20 trips to New York last year.
Yeah. Speaking of Washington, what do you think of the Clinton administration?
Well,
Since you worked for the
Well,
president
well.
and you wrote this wonderful book called White House Mess.
well, I like he's a guy of my generation.
Mine too.
Yes, although he's significantly older than I am. And I like
Yes,
some of
of
his
course he is.
style. I like some of his style, but let's face it, there's a bit of a credibility problem.
Yeah.
And philosophically, he's a big government guy. He's a guy who's lived in public housing for most of his life. He's never met a payroll. I like a president who's met a payroll.
Yeah.
I like a president
You're one of those guys, are you?
yeah. I like a
Yeah.
guy with a very fundamental sense of economics, not
Yeah.
something learned at, God save
Yeah.
us, Harvard, Oxford,
and
or
I
Yale.
certainly hope you're opposed to inherited wealth.
Absolutely,
You are.
Charlie.
You
Yes,
would-
my
and-
father's planning to spend all of his before he passes it on.
On selling.
Yeah, there'll be none left.
Right. And you'd swear it off anyway, because
Absolutely.
a man ought to go out and earn his own living and not
bet.
take it from his
You bet.
parents, right?
Absolutely. I'd give it to the Sierra Club anyway, if there's any left.
Would you really?
Absolutely.
Why the Sierra Club?
Oh, I don't know. Or the Fund for Whales.
Tell me. the fun for
Wonderful
whale.
creatures,
Yeah.
Charlie. Wonderful creatures.
Tell me about the story, speaking of FYI, the
Mm-hmm.
magazine that you write for, the Quarterly, or that you're the editor of, the hoax that you prepared about Lenin, and that in fact the Russians, at the dissolution of the, you don't want me to take this anywhere,
Oh, no.
do you?
No,
At the
fine.
dissolution of the Soviet Empire, so that they thought, well, we need money, so you prepared this hoax.
We ran a story in FYI saying that the Russians, to raise hard currency,
Yeah.
were prepared to auction off the body of Vladimir Lenin, but that it was going to be done in a dignified way, sealed bids only, with a floor of $15 million.
Yeah.
And we faxed out the story at 4:30, just as all the news organizations are getting close to
So they don't have
closing.
time to
And
check
we-
it out.
And we stood back from the phones, and my phone the next day went, and Peter Jennings went with it.
Yeah. Or ABC News, World News Tonight went with
World
it.
News went with it, and the next morning my phone went into meltdown. The first call was from my boss of bosses, Steve Forbes, saying, Chris, the Russians have gone ballistic.
Yeah.
And,
And then you got a call from Peter.
the Minister of the Interior of Russia had to break into local programming to assure them that this wasn't the case. The funny thing was, 6 months later, there was an article in the Washington Post saying that the Kremlin had been, and I quote, deluged with offers for Lenin's corpse, including one offer from a man in Texas for $37 million, accompanied by a sort of a sweet letter saying that, well, we've just finished our world headquarters down here, and I've talked to the decorator, and he thinks Mr. Lenin would make a really nice addition to our lobby.
The book is called Thank You for Smoking. It is a terrific read. And funny and interesting and satirical, all the things that Chris Buckley intended it to be, and it'll help him pay the mortgage, for goodness sakes. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
Great to
Charlie.
see you. We'll be back on July 4th. Thank you for joining us. See you on the 4th.